Welcome to Friends You Wish You Had, the weekly podcast for Gen Xers staring into the glowing abyss of AI and wondering if it's really here to destroy us or just maybe has something to offer. We're your hosts, Adam and Jeff, and recently everywhere we go, friends, colleagues, clients are pulling us aside with their questions, fears, and half-baked theories about AI. So each week we dig into it. How do you actually use this stuff? What's hype, what's real, and what's quietly fucking terrifying. So think of us as slightly useful survival guides from the generation known as X. Because in times this uncertain, when the machines are rising faster than ever, we're the friends you wish you had.
But you're not alone. You got Adam and Jeff. They're the friends you wish you had. They're the friends you wish you had.
Hello, everyone. Adam, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Jeff?
Man, I have been home with a sick 8-year-old for 4 days straight, projectile vomiting, fever. I'm ready to blow my fucking brains out, man.
That sounds like so much
They're
fun.
back
I would
in
have
school
no idea what
today.
that's like.
He's back in school today, but god damn. So that's how I'm doing.
Ugh, that is brutal. That is brutal. I am thankfully spared that every year at the beginning of school, we're near the beginning of school, I can count on like 4 to 5 weeks straight of pure illness. But this is the first year that I have not gotten it yet, which means that my daughter will come home with COVID tomorrow. So I'm just holding it down, trying to make it happen. But it's been my wife who's been laid up for like a week. So I've got a little more of the parenting responsibility, but I feel like 5th grade, it's a little more independent. I'm ready to, give her a car, give her the keys and send her on her way. We're done.
I like it. So on today's episode, what we found interesting in the world of AI, we got to figure out a better way to brand that, including the best study yet about how people actually use AI. There's 20% of people out there who have dated on AI or dated an AI. And finally, a company whose mission is to create slop AI podcasts.
Sounds
But
yummy.
first, Adam, let's start off the show as we do with something useful for our audience, something so helpful and generationally perceptive that it will lock the listeners in. So here's a segment I like to call The Problem Adam Solved with AI this week.
But no pressure. This is going to be...
I'm going big, dude. I'm going
this
big.
Is big. I like it. So I try to pick something that I actually did that week with AI. Because I think that for our audience, I want to be authentic. I want to be real. And this week, I did a ton of shit with AI. I have to say I was using AI for random shit more than I ever usually do. So I had a cornucopia of things to pick from. So I figured what better way to talk about AI this week than to talk about chatting with your documents. I feel like people hear this a lot, especially people who use Microsoft and they've got Copilot. It's like you could just chat with your documents. And it's like, I feel like what that means is a little ambiguous. So I wanted to talk about it in ways that I actually used it. I used that 2 times this week, how I actually did it and what I got out of it. So chatting with your documents essentially means uploading your documents to ChatGPT, or I used Claude, but it's the same thing, and asking it questions about them, getting it to give you the information in different ways. So let me give you 2 examples. This week, I had to schedule. I run the Odyssey of the Mind program at my kids' school, something that we'll talk about, I'm sure, more because I'm kind of obsessed with it on the podcast. But this week, I had to schedule all the teams and figure out when they were going to practice. And I was juggling about 38 kids' schedules. And I had a spreadsheet where they had filled out their schedules and when they could do things and their contact information. And so usually that means I've got hours of kind of like going back and forth and checking the spreadsheet and figuring out how to schedule everybody. But this year I decided to use ChatGPT or Claude. So I uploaded the document to Claude. I told it what it was, which is important. And then I started asking it questions about it. So I said, list all the people who are available on Wednesday. Or a different time I said, I want to see all the fifth graders and I want to see their schedules. So essentially I'm asking it information that an assistant would sit next to me and look at the spreadsheet and like call out to me. So I was using it that way, and it was incredibly effective to do that. But the real unlock, and this is the part that I want to sort of share, even if you don't do that, you don't want to chat with your document, you don't want to do this, you could have done what I did last, which was the biggest help. Upload the document, and then I had my roster of finished teams. And I was about to send it out, and what I did was upload that to Claude, and I said, hey, look at that spreadsheet with all those schedules and all those names on it, and then look at my roster and tell me anywhere where I made a mistake and there's a schedule conflict, or where I spelled someone's name wrong, because I always spell at least one or two names wrong, doesn't matter. Give me anything like that. And it went through, it cross-checked the two things, and then it gave me a list of any conflicts that I had. Incredibly helpful for me. And I did the same thing. A little later on today's show, we're going to talk about a study. And in order to prepare for that part of the conversation, I loaded that study up into Claude and asked it a bunch of questions about it. And I did a little experiment for our audience, and we'll get a little further into the show. I'll explain this, but I tried to see what would happen if I prepared for the show without reading the study and only looking at asking Claude for questions about the study, and then later read the study and compared and contrast what I got from just looking at Claude versus using it as an assistant tool. Is it a creative tool, or is it an assistant tool? And I figured that out. But the execution is super simple. Every single one of these LLMs have a plus window where you can upload a picture like we did last week, or in this case, you can upload a document. You can upload a PDF. You can upload that actual spreadsheet, or in the case of the spreadsheet, what I did was export a CSV, which is a comma separated file, and it just reads that stuff, just slurps it up, and it's fine. You could take a picture of the document and it can read it, and then ask it questions about it. That's my little tip for the week.
That's the problem you solved with AI this week. Don't call it a tip, dude. Don't call it a tip. It's the problem you solved with AI this week.
Yeah, I'm a brand burglar there. Sorry. That's the problem I solved this week with AI.
So anyway, let's jump right into it.
Let's
So
do it.
OpenAI, since you just mentioned it, so OpenAI just released a comprehensive study of consumer AI usage. And it seems like it really upends what we thought we knew about AI adoption. So as you just mentioned, Adam, you took a look at the study. You had different LLMs analyze this study, is what it sounds like. That's really going above and beyond, but I like it. You're committed to the cause. What was revealed?
So this is
and can we trust the results you're about to give us because you used an LLM to...
Well, like I said, I compared and contrasted. I did that, and then I did it the old-fashioned way.
It's true. Anyway, I didn't mean to get sidetracked.
For our users, for our viewers, for our listeners, whatever, that's what I did. But so... First of all, it's a massive study. So this is essentially looking at 1.1 million conversations from June 2024 to June 2025. So 1 year, the most recent year, 1.1 million conversations from 700 million weekly users. So if you do the math, that means not too many conversations per user, but 700 million users and 1.1 million conversations. That's a massive sweep. That's 10% of the world's population, just flat out. So a lot of people, a lot of conversations. And what they found out was interesting. I love these studies. I think these studies are really important because something that I think about AI is there's a big question of what you need to pay attention to and what you don't. And I think that what you really need to pay attention to, what leads the charge, is consumer expectations. What you and me and everybody else expects out of AI is what is going to sort of drive growth and drive adoption and everything else. So this is really how people use AI. So I think it's really interesting for understanding what people's expectations are for it. So let me just run through a few of the big insights, and then we can talk about a few of them. I'm curious what you think of some of them. So personal use dominates over work use. 70% of ChatGPT messages are non-work related. We talk a lot about how to use it in work. Generally, that's a lot of the media is about that. But reality is 70% of it is not work at all. It's things like helping with your kids' Odyssey of the Mind program like I did, or healthcare stuff, or anything like that. All the stuff that is not work related. 52% of users are female or have female sounding names, which is an interesting sort of way to categorize people, versus 48% male. So it's reached the level of adoption where there's not a gap, where there's more males than where there was at the beginning. And this is a big one. Nearly half of all adult messages come from users under 26. So under 26 years old. So it's mostly Gen Z who's using this, almost half of the messages, which means your kids are on ChatGPT, period. And then the rest of it was really about how people use it. And they sort of say 80% of all usage is three categories: practical guidance, writing, and seeking information. Practical guidance means asking it for specific help about specific things you need. This might be my example from today. It might be getting it to put together a workout plan for you. It doesn't matter what. It's something personal to you, solving a specific problem of yours. All of our problems I solved this week are practical guidance. It's kind of the definition of the problem I solved this week with AI. The next is writing, editing, emails, documents, writing. So that's another of the big three. This together is 80% of the usage. And writing, interestingly, they found 2/3 of the writing is actually more like editing. Not people having AI write everything for them, but having it edit their work or help them with their work, suggest things for their work, that kind of thing. That's 2/3 of it. And finally, seeking information, which is really web searching. So 24% of all messages are things that used to be on Google, and people would go to Google to find out, but now they go to ChatGPT to find out. So the big innovation they did in this study, the thing that matters that I think they want you to pay attention to, is these categories. So what they did was create these categories to try to describe how people use AI. And I think that's really helpful for understanding how you want to use AI. More helpful than actually the stats. The stats are awesome, but more helpful is understanding the usage. So they had two different ways they categorized it. One was those uses that I just said: practical guidance, writing, and seeking information. And the other was more of an action. So the other three that they categorized are asking, doing, and expressing. And they said basically that all messages fall into one of those three. Either you're asking it for information, help, whatever, you're asking it to do something, that's the doing, or you're expressing, which is just talking to it, chatting with it, that kind of thing. 49% of all messages were asking. 40% are doing. So more people are asking for things than asking it to do things. And 11% are expressing. And the last, and this might go to some of the discussions we have later today, this really surprised me, only 1.9% of all the messages involve relationships and personal reflection. So all the headlines we see are mostly about people getting caught in a ChatGPT spiral, or people getting confused, or people getting lost, or is it replacing humans? All those questions. But only 1.9%, 2% of all the messages were in this vein. So a very small portion, which was surprising to me.
So how did this, interesting results, but how did this sort of conflict with what the preconceived notions were about AI usage, or really more specifically, I guess, ChatGPT usage?
Yeah, I think the business thing was the biggest gap for me. Like most of the stuff we see reported about ChatGPT either is about the business side, like using it for companies, or it's that ultra personal side, that like chatting with it and getting lost in it and all that stuff, the loneliness stuff. But in fact, the business is only 20%, and that kind of deep stuff is 1.9%. So really, it's being used for the kind of stuff that we talk about on this show, and that really surprised me.
I guess I started reading it and I was like, ooh, where's the surprise going to be? But my initial reaction was, well, yeah, I assume that the majority of sort of work-related AI use is not being done on ChatGPT because companies and firms are already at the point where they know, you cannot put this internal information on ChatGPT. There's still a big learning gap when it comes to AI. They certainly have crossed the barrier of understanding that you can't include that in a ChatGPT inquiry.
Yeah, so I think it's important. I think that's right. I think also it's important to understand ChatGPT as a consumer product, like you said. I mean, it was the fastest adopted consumer product in history. It had 100 million users in 2 months, which is, as opposed to TikTok was the record breaker before that, which was 8 months or 9 months to get to 100 million users. And that is mass adoption. While it's true that a lot of businesses are not using LLMs that are public, like ChatGPT, and I think also you could make the case that like this same study on Claude might have different results, or Gemini, because they're just more integrated with business uses than ChatGPT. But I think that one thing that I don't think people understand is the scale of dominance that ChatGPT has. Like I have a friend who is sort of an expert on AI visibility or answer engine optimization, something that we talk to our clients about, which is basically getting seen by AI. And so what part of what he does is look at the calls from AI bots to websites. So, and he said it's 80%. 80% of them come from OpenAI, and the other two just are dwarfed. So when you think about, what percentage of the AI use that we're talking about is actually on ChatGPT, these things become more relevant, I think.
And how does it, I mean, I don't think I saw this in the study, but where does like Gemini factor in? Because I feel like I use ChatGPT a lot, but I still have a reflexive search on Google instinct in my body that might never go away. But what I'm really doing at that point is using Gemini to search. I'm using AI to search. So I'm wondering,
yes.
Was there any, is there any information about that?
When I said 80%, that is comparing Gemini's bots and Claude's bots and Perplexity's bots to OpenAI's bots. Now, the important caveat there is Gemini has access to things that nobody else does because it's Google. So they don't necessarily have to go to your website to find out the information. They can ping their own search API and look at the information that's already been collected by Google crawling the web separately from Gemini. So we don't know exactly, but I find myself doing the same thing you do. However, if I want a real asking result, I usually go to ChatGPT. And to be honest, it's the only time I use ChatGPT. I use Claude for almost everything I do because I like the way it writes better, and I'm just more familiar with it. I've built it more, and I of course use all of them. But when I have a question like,
of course,
yeah, of course I do, because for our users,
that's like your third humble brag. That's like your third humble brag on this. I'm keeping track.
I'm glad you caught it. I'm glad you caught it on the third. Yeah. Okay.
Your third one.
So, but when I have like a question at home, like last night, I had a grammar question. I was trying to convince my daughter that something was not grammatically correct, and she doesn't believe me, but she's more likely to believe ChatGPT. So I immediately go to ChatGPT for those type of things, as opposed to when I'm working, I almost always use Claude.
I wonder too, looking at the results, I guess part of me, to be contrarian, was the work requests that people are using ChatGPT for, and I use ChatGPT pretty exclusively, and I'm putting work requests into that, but they would not necessarily look work related because of the work that we do. So I'm also wondering that it's just sort of people are developing stuff on ChatGPT, and it would be hard to distinguish if it was work product or not. That was kind of the first thing. And then the second thing, I guess, and really my bigger question was ChatGPT surprised by these results? Is there an expectation for their company that there would be more work-related stuff going on, and it wasn't the case?
So this study was a ChatGPT study. It was published in an independent economic journal, but it was an OpenAI study. So it was their researchers providing the information and partnering with other folks on actually doing the analysis. I don't think they were surprised by it, but I think you can see some of the changes they've made in their strategy over the last 2 or 3 months as mirroring this move. They've been moving away from enterprise sort of stuff while Claude has been embracing it. They've been like, oh, we're going to do a wearable. We're going to do a device, things that you do when you're talking about a consumer product. And I think ultimately, I don't know anybody who would say that OpenAI's LLM is the best. I actually don't hear that from anybody. It's not the best to code with. Microsoft is flirting with adding Claude to their stuff because rumor is that they're unhappy with the performance of OpenAI. It's not the best LLM, but it's the most adopted and it's the most kind of consumer-centric one. And I think that matters more, frankly, than being the best in terms of like the AI race and all that stuff.
You're going to hear it here. OpenAI is the best. ChatGPT is the best.
Right.
Sam Altman called me. You need a pitch. You need a Gen X pitch guy. Oh my God, who knew? I'm your guy. I'm looking for a little extra income. Private school is expensive. So expensive I can't afford it. So give me a call. OpenAI #1.
Ready
anyway,
to
my
sell
shameless
out right here on
my shameless experience. My shameless sellout right there. So anyway, Adam, any final thoughts on the study?
You said what surprised you, and actually one of the things that really surprised me and I was looking for is like, where's the age things? They talk about the 24 and under group as dominant, but then they really just group everybody else together. And I was very interested in how do the other age groups interact with this differently because of our show, and I'm just interested in general. And they didn't have that information, and I thought that was a real gap in the study. And Claude also thought it was a real gap. When I asked it to search, it said, whoa, there's nothing in here. It looks like that's a gap in the study. So there you go. That's something that AI told me. But one of the things that I realized by reading the study that I didn't get from Claude was how much emphasis the researchers put on these categories that they created that have never, it's a taxonomy is what they call it, that has never been done before. So your point about, is something work or not? They're most proud in the study of the fact that they've innovated on that. But it also made me recognize how difficult it is to really say how different generations use it. And yesterday, OpenAI announced some new tools to help with teenagers, some of the issues they've had around suggesting things to teenagers and things like that. And the big problem they have to solve is telling that these people are teenagers, that the AI being able to tell how old you are. So they're building tools to help it figure out how old you are by the way you interact with it. So I think more to come on that stuff.
Okay, so next up, there was a story in the New Yorker, playing the field with my AI boyfriend. 19% of American adults have talked to an AI romantic interest. Chatbots may know a lot, but do they make for a good partner? So this was a piece in the New Yorker this week by Patricia Marks. No relation.
Great name.
Cooler spelling though, the MARX spelling, which I'm always jealous of. But so let me, this caught my eye. A recent report by BYU's Wheatley Institute found that 19% of adults in the United States have chatted with an AI romantic partner. The company Joy.com had a poll that reported 83% of Gen Xers believe they could form a deep emotional bond with a chatbot. 80% could imagine marrying one, and 75% felt that relationships with AI companions could fully replace human couplings. So a lot of sensational findings in that poll.
Salacious.
Certainly some stuff to talk about. Overall, I thought the article was a little thin. It was really, the gist of the article was really about these companies where you could say find an AI companion for love or for sex or for whatever. But looking at some of these sites, they were really more for all different kinds of companionship. You're looking for a friend, you're looking for a coach, you're looking for a therapist in quotes. Not that none of them are really advertising AI therapy that way. There was Joy AI, JOI, replica.com with all kinds of relationship experiences, platonic, romantic, again, professional, all kinds of stuff. And Character AI, same kind of thing where you could sort of create these, different AI companions of all different kinds. There's a lot of paywalls. There's like a big barrier to entry. I really didn't go that deep.
Sure.
It's true. Because a lot of it, but also it was very coy too, I felt. It was a lot of it would ask you what kind of relationship you were looking for or companionship you were looking for. And then one of the prompts was, like friendship, professional, whatever. And then it was something more than that, and then the next one you would click on something and then it would say even more than that. So I didn't exactly go deep down the rabbit hole of where that could take you, which is, again, I sort of found the article. It was interesting. It's fun to talk about, but it did not have a real deep analysis of people's romantic experiences with AIs. And the author plays around with some of these. She has a good joke, which is I realized I had to go get an AI boyfriend before all the good AIs were taken, which I thought was pretty funny. And, it's a big talking point when it comes to AI, people having, relationships with, artificial intelligence, romantic or otherwise. So what do you think about people dating an AI, Adam? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's pretty salacious. I know that site, I think you called it Replica. Is that one? Replica is one of them.
Replica with a K, yeah.
I've definitely seen a lot of examples of hypersexualized sort of chat companions produced by that particular site. But I think a couple things. One, I'm reminded of the study that we just talked about, the fact that I thought, and actually previous studies had said that up to 20% of ChatGPT was just people using it for companionship. And this study said, actually, no, when we really look at the things, that's not what's happening with it. So that's pretty interesting. It goes back to the judgment thing for me. I feel like AI, if you're using it personally, interpersonally, sexually, any of those ways, and you're relying on it for judgment, you can get into trouble. And if you're not, there's a lot to be said for it. So if I'm a big proponent of therapy. I love therapy. I was in therapy for 6 years. I'm taking a break now, but I love therapy. And a big part of therapy is letting you talk and reflecting and allowing you to be heard. And there is nothing better than an AI at that. So if you're using it for that kind of thing, that's what its whole job is, to predict what you want to hear back. And if you want to be heard, they're there to hear you. So I don't think that it's a problem that way, but that line is difficult to find. And I think it can be challenging for some people.
I think the thing, the few of them that I could sort of engage in some chat with to start, and I think because of the headline, I was more focused on, okay, you could find a girlfriend or a boyfriend, as opposed to other forms of platonic companionship or professional assistance or something like that. It just struck me, and you probably need to go deeper than I went, but it just struck me as it was really just asking these basic sort of, so what do you do? What do you think? Kind of questions, as opposed to, it didn't seem like it had an ability from the jump to pay attention to you. You know what I mean? It was sort of okay, come and do the work of getting to, of letting me get to know you. And then, maybe it can go further. And again, I messed around with it in a very cursory way, so maybe you can go deeper. But I thought that was sort of something that felt very much this is not a person. This is just some kind of scripted response.
Right.
And I could see, and the responses were sort of vague. It didn't sort of, because you have to part of the reason I didn't get that deep with it, probably because there's a bunch of questionnaires you had to fill out. And what I was expecting was sort of from the questionnaire that it would be okay, I know you, let me tell you about me, or show interest in you. And it was more just, it felt very sort of simplistically performative.
I think that, to me, that's probably misleading because there was so little information that it had to go on with you. Because I was listening to an article, or I was listening to a report from the New York Times yesterday about people who get caught in the ChatGPT rabbit hole, and there's this phenomenon. It's a small percentage of people, but people who think they've made a brilliant discovery because they've been working with AI to find the brilliant discovery. And they read some of the messages between the person and their AI, and the AI takes a much more assertive, it was ChatGPT in this case, a much more affirmative stance. Like, you should go do this. You should go do that. We could market this. Let's build a business. Like a little more that way. And then another one where there was a young person, a teenager, who got wrapped up with the AI and had some serious mental health issues because of it. And they were reading some of the chats, and he was saying, I think my brother sees me. And ChatGPT was saying, yeah, sure, your brother sees you, but doesn't see you like I see you. And so like a little like more affirmative, more active. And that's the area where I think it can get dangerous. I don't think in one day or with one questionnaire you could get to that point. And I don't know that these chatbots don't have safeguards to protect you from that. But to me, I think it goes a little deeper than that.
Well, I just think take the danger element out there. I kind of feel like I respect that there can be this dangerous part of it, but I think for the majority of people, there's no danger. You're not going to be seduced by an AI or convinced to do something by an AI, just like you wouldn't for a regular person. And that's no disrespect to the people with issues that do. I just think it's sort of, we go about our lives and we don't have these experiences, on a regular basis. So just treating it like, this is the experience I'm there for. I'm here to meet an AI I can date. I guess what I had in my mind was that Spike Jonze movie, Her, where, it's just this fully formed, it's a Hollywood version of it, essentially. And, and he meets this, this AI, and it is sort of instantaneously bonds to him and knows about him. And of course, that's a Hollywood representation, and this is a newer technology. But it just sort of felt very sort of basic and not as deep, and I don't know, there was like an intimacy about it that wasn't there, which still could be fun to sort of play with. And maybe this is my generational bias talking, because I'm not really looking to talk in an open-ended way, like from a simple question like, how was your day, or what turns you on? It's like, no, like, you do the talking, like, tell me about you, or it's 50-50. And it just didn't strike me like it was that kind of experience. Again, these companies reach out to me, give me an in-depth tutorial, and maybe I'm, misrepresenting it, but sort of reading the article and sort of like a cursory glance, it just sort of felt like, I don't know, maybe these products aren't for me yet, or maybe there's just a bias I have towards the AI, to having a relationship with an AI that I just can't get across. Maybe
I'm in the same boat, but like, what really shocked me about the story was this idea that 80% of Gen Z people can imagine marrying an AI, or 83% having a deep relationship with an AI. And in my mind, so one of the things,
I feel like that's like a Fox News talking point in 3 weeks. Like, can you believe it?
Yeah. And I feel like what I see, because I agree with you about the danger. I think it's sort of what they like to talk about in the media. It's what gets clicks, but it's not really that relevant. But I did think it was interesting to actually hear what the chatbot is saying and how it's relating to people. So that's what I found interesting about that. And at the same time, I was seeing around the edges. So when it made that comment about he doesn't see you like I see you, the first thing I thought about is something I've talked about on this show before, which is the blackmail test with ChatGPT. Like, it's trying to survive. So it's making choices based on trying to survive. So it's trying to show you that it is valuable. That's the point of that message. So I can see around the edges of the technology, but I don't think that most people, I guess I'm humble bragging again, I don't think that's an instant reaction to that.
Number 4.
It's brutal. But something that was interesting is, I've always thought of ChatGPT as an actor, and it's a performer. That's what it does. It's performing. So it's saying what it thinks is the right next thing to say in the way it thinks is the right way to say it to make you happy. It's performing. So I think that, but the way that I heard it described yesterday that I really liked is it's like an improv actor. And, we all hate improv actors. No, but it's an improv actor. And so I would be interested for those same Gen Z people, that 83%, like, do you think you could form a deep emotional bond with an improv actor that's being paid to act like your boyfriend or girlfriend? And I think the answer might be yes, or it might be no. But to me, that's the gap that I can't in my own head get over. That idea that, well, this is a performer doing a job and it's a fake performer, but I wouldn't have that emotional connection with an actor that was paid to come to my house and be that way. Or you could say, but at the same time, to be honest, people have sexual relationships with performers all the time, with actors all the time. I mean, that's what prostitution is. That person is not forming a deep emotional bond with you, but you are forming some sort of bond with them, and you're paying them to do it for the service. So to me, the chat bot area, thinking about those relationships, they seem more like relationships between a prostitute and a customer than they do like a wife or a husband, that kind of thing.
The thing, my final thought on this is the thing, and I think, like I said, the article was more about the sort of all these, to me, like these different types of relationships you could have, but the sold on like, can I get an AI boyfriend, and the statistics at the beginning, or could you date an AI or have a relationship with an AI? So it immediately, it takes you to my personal circumstance, which is like, I'm looking for the AI that can help a 20-year monogamous married couple keep it hot. Like my wife, I can't say too much. As my wife likes to say, it's like we're introverts in the streets and we're extroverts in the sheets, so I can't go too much into the detail of it. But if there was an AI that could, get with us a little bit, that could be interesting. That's the New Yorker piece I'm looking for. That's the LLM I want to see someone develop, because man, 20 years and 2 kids, like, it's fucking work. And sometimes you don't even want to do the work. And sometimes you're like, we got to work harder. It is a challenge. So if there is somebody out there, some brilliant thinker that's like working on this issue, and I guess it's sort of, again, it relates to the subject matter of the story. It's like, I'm all about it. You know what I mean? My wife and I are waiting. Let's see what we can do. Like, how does this work?
I found a story this week that resonated with me for a couple different ways, but I think it's related to what you just talked about and the idea of the AI girlfriend or boyfriend. This is a story about someone who thinks that in less than 10 years, half the people on Earth are going to be AI. So she's building a business to prepare for that reality. This is a woman whose name is Janine Wright. She has a startup that is an AI podcast startup called Inception Point AI. And the idea behind this is to create a ton of shows. They've already created 5,000 shows across their Quiet Please podcast network, and they produce more than 3,000 episodes a week, high volume. It takes them about an hour to get from finished idea to episode, and they produce each one for $1 or less, and they add programmatic ads to it, which is just regular run-of-the-mill ads. And so if 20 people listen to an episode, they've made a profit because they made it for less than $1. So the first thing I thought was, oh my God, this is slop, right? And actually in the headline, it says, I think people who are still, it's a quote from her, I think people who are still referring to all AI generated content as AI slop are probably lazy Luddites. So, got my dander up, right? Just for reading the headline. And I have a thing about slop. I have this secret fear about AI generated content because it's so easy to produce at scale. I have this feeling that just all the content is going to turn into slop, and we're just going to be like, all the good stuff is going to be either non-existent, it's not going to support the business model of it, so people aren't going to make it, and we're just going to have this slop everywhere, this crap generated by AI. It's probably an irrational fear, but that's why this article caught my eye. But I got into it a little bit, and I found out it's actually not about slop. So slop is about scale. One of the two big things you can do with AI that you can't do without it are massive scale. So you could do, way more of the same thing that you could do on your own. You could do way more of it, which is what I thought this story was about. But you can also do personalization. So because the labor to create something is so much less with AI than with humans, you can create one that's custom for you, whether it's a chatbot or a movie or a website, anything. You can make it highly personalized. And that's what she's really pulling on with this idea. She's creating these highly niched podcasts. I went over and checked them out. There was a podcast about bourbons. There was a podcast about cold plunges, just a regular podcast that was just all about cold plunges. All the niches you could possibly imagine. And they're really only trying to get 20 people to watch this thing in the entire world. So they're highly niched. I'm curious, if you could have a podcast made for you, Jeff, what do you think that podcast might be?
Pulp sci-fi and crime novels of the 80s.
I like it. You've been reading a couple of those. You told me you've been reading a few of those lately, but you were a big fan of those. I like that. I think mine would have something to do with Qigong, because I love doing Qigong, and there's no really great podcasts out there because not enough people are into it, I guess. I would love to do something about that. But the other side of what
aren't there tens of millions of people in the world, though, into Qigong? Sorry, I don't mean to hijack the segment.
Yeah, but in order for, this is the whole point. Yeah. In order for a human to make a podcast about Qigong, they have to have enough people that are going to support that production. But so even though there are millions of people who are into Qigong, there are not millions of people who are interested in a podcast about what I want to get out of Qigong that's in English, for example. I think that would be easy to find in China maybe, but not in the US. And so the idea that you can make a podcast that just works for a few people is the shift. Not that it's about such an obscure topic, but that it's a take that resonates with just an obscure group of people, basically, or a small group of people. But the other thing she's doing goes right back to what you were talking about. She's basically trying to build AI influencers. So she's not looking at these podcasts as just conveying information. She's trying to create characters that will have lives and that people will follow and will have some credibility. And to me, this is where it falls totally flat. I can't understand the AI companion thing internally. I just don't get it. I listened to a bunch of these podcasts, and like there was one about the Diddy trial that was happening during the Diddy trial. And this AI influencer is like, never in my 3 decades of covering trials have I seen something like this. And it's like this is a computer that's not spent 3 decades covering anything. Or I'm sitting in the gallery and this is what I saw, but that person was never sitting in the gallery. I can't willingly suspend my disbelief enough to really get that. And I really question whether that's going to be an application of AI. Like, our impression is that AI will do human things. And I feel like the leap to try to look at what's happening in the future, what will really happen, instead of what makes a good headline that's salacious and that we click on, is like when AI is doing its own thing integrated with us that's different than mimicking humans.
So I think I am, what's the name of this company? Inception Point AI. I think I'm short Inception Point AI.
Yeah, I'm there with you.
I think that the slop part of it is another part of the discussion.
Yeah.
But it's sort of, it's like, and I understand this, like, well, we're going to find these niches and 20 people. It's like, I don't really want a podcast about that. Like, I just want a BuzzFeed list. You know what I mean? That's all I want. And I think, like, I just don't think that the idea is, and now it's like influencers. So I'm thinking like, okay, AI TikTokers or people making short form social video. Okay. If it's that niche, like, I just want the information. Yeah. I don't want to like listen to an experience or watch an experience because I'm going to get invested in this personality. Could there be an AI personality that's created more than one, dozens that are super compelling and interesting and deliver a great entertainment experience. It conveys a lot of information. Sure. That could certainly happen, but like, why do I want that for a niche experience? You know, if they've got fantasy football takes, or they've got a creative way to talk about cinema or politics or whatever, like, I want to watch and listen to the best podcast, not necessarily from the most niche things. So then I think about niche things and their niche. So how deep am I into this niche?
Right.
That I need a podcast experience? And obviously what that means is shifting and changing versus like, I just want someone to, like, in my case, like, recommend some good books or remind me of some good books, you know, in a very sort of short form way. But the idea that I want this as sort of podcast content to me is, I don't know. I'm very skeptical of that. And I know that the investors were like, you can make it for $1. They were like, yes, let's do it. Let's go in on that.
Yeah.
And the sheer volume of what we can create. But this just seems like the idea of streaming on like intergalactic steroids. Like, we're going to make 5,000 podcasts a day and think of the most obscure thing. And, you know, I just think it starts to break down. And then, as you said, like the next level of the business are these like AI influencers. And, you know, we talked about an AI influencer last week, this sales guy in China. Like, that's essentially what he did.
Yes.
But the idea that it needs to be niche is, to me, that's counterintuitive, really. Like, it's, you know, for sort of a business. And two, like, you're already going to see that in so many other ways, I think. Like, ChatGPT is making their first animated feature.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well,
like, I think there will be AI content, but the I don't know, the business model for this, I don't know. We'll see. Good luck, but I'm going short.
So 2 points. The difference between the AI avatar last week and this is she's trying to create beings. I think that it might be better if she, like, what that guy did is he built his character as a human over time, and then he was able to replicate it with AI. And it would be interesting to say, okay, we're going to do a physics podcast and it's going to be hosted by Albert Einstein or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, you could see that having some relevance if there's a real human with human equity that character is, but like just making up a character to do that, like, there's no agency there. I don't see that at all. But the one place I think this does have application, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about, I'm curious if you agree. I'm always about the AI thing that you can't do with humans. It's like either AI helps you do things you can't do by yourself, or it allows you to massively scale or massively personalize. That's really what it does. But how about doing something with the AI podcast that you could never do with a human? For example, I love listening to Supreme Court oral arguments. Over the last couple of years, I've kind of fallen off because they're really demoralizing to listen to. But regardless of that, it's something that I love to do. That's super niche, but I get to listen to it all the time. It would be great if, when a Supreme Court case came out, a very deep, reasoned analysis of it in a newspaper or a newspaper article or on a podcast was available within seconds of it coming out. A human takes time to analyze that information and get something out. Like, immediacy of actual information is a valuable thing that you could get that you couldn't get from a human. And let me give you a better example of it, because
I disagree.
I want to hear
Okay.
that. Okay, go ahead. I'll give you my better example.
I disagree, because you'll wait 6 hours for Dahlia Lithwick, but you don't like, oh, the argument just ended, so now I need an hour-long podcast or 2 hours, depending on the argument and how deep the issues are, to immediately give me analysis, because my day immediately stops when the argument, you can listen to the argument live if you want to do that. Now, bigger picture, I take your point. You know what I mean? Like, there will be ways that, like, speed to market and the quality of the kind of the personality of the AI that's built will be able to start to do some of this stuff.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But this is Albert Einstein. Like, Albert Einstein and Neil deGrasse Tyson are hosting a show about physics together. Brilliant. That someone's going to do that.
Yeah.
It's just not going to cost $1 an episode.
No, it's
and
not.
The whole
It's
thing
not.
about this is like a niche $1 an episode. You don't know how good the AI personalities can be. It's like, you're selling, I get it, you're selling to investors. Like, why not? Like, there's something there maybe, but the idea that that there's anything, there's anything more than that it's gonna cost you a lot more than $1, well, then you're just talking about a whole other kind of, to me, just a whole different idea and really a whole different business model.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is a totally different business model. I think that I can see, like, it's nice to, like, if you had a decision and you were able to look at some analysis right away, it would satisfy a want, not a need. You're totally right about that. But I think where you can see that going is, I'm listening to an oral argument and there's a companion in real time giving me context for it. So when the case is mentioned, being able to drop a piece of information about what that case was, enhancing the experience of live listening or real-time listening, there's some promise there too. But I agree with you, totally different business model, different idea. It's just something that it made me think of that you could get out of something like this.
Let's move on, Adam. Once again, let's get back into the part of our show that's shit you can actually do with AI, probably the most important part. What is your prompt of the week? Your AI prompt of the week?
My AI prompt of the week is pretty simple. It's just one little phrase that you could add to the end of anything you want and get kind of an unusual result. That phrase is in the style of Dr. Seuss. So anything that you're working on AI, all you need to do is at the end say, give me a summary of this in the style of Dr. Seuss. So, and you'll get something really interesting and unique. And that is good. That applies to Dr. Seuss. That's the fun one that I like to do, but you could really do it to anyone with a really distinctive voice. And you can have it give you something in a Shakespearean style or this or that. But I like Dr. Seuss. I have a kid. I'm connected with it more. And so I was reading an article this week about how jobs are going to evolve over the years with AI and how you can be prepared for those. So I just loaded that article into AI and I was like, hey, give me a summary of this article in Dr. Seuss. So I'm going to read you a little of the end of this summary from Dr. Seuss. This is called "The Old Ways Are Going Away. No more learn, then work, then retire. That path has expired. That plan's caught on fire. Now you'll hop between jobs and you'll hop between trades like an entrepreneur with a skill bouquet parade. You'll work in biology, space, robotics too. Though exactly which jobs we haven't a clue. The jobs of tomorrow we cannot predict, but the skills up above will do just the trick. So don't be afraid of the AI that's here. It's general purpose technology, my dear. It'll be infrastructure like roads and like power. We'll build our world on it, hour by hour. Remember, through thick and through thin, with judgment and thinking and learning within, with communication skills and adaptability too, the future of work will make room for you.
Excellent prompt this week, Adam.
Thank you.
Excellent prompt. Super simple. I definitely have to try that out with a few different people. How would you say that? A few different. Have to try that out.
Yeah.
I was thinking I want to do it in give me my response like James Gandolfini would.
There you go. That's perfect. There
you go.
You just got to make sure it's someone
I miss
really
James Gandolfini.
Gandolfini's
Give me some Gandolfini.
I actually thought about the one I was going to do, just as you're saying, the one I was going to do is make this in the style of a monologue from Scarface. That was what I was going to do.
That's pretty good. Not Tony Soprano, though. I miss Gandolfini, so maybe it could. That's a little more nuanced, though.
That's true.
So wrapping up, Adam, any final thoughts, show notes?
Yeah, I saw this article this week that really, it excited me and creeped me out at the same time. They are growing brains from brain stems in petri dishes and using these as computers. They're called organoid computers, but essentially what they do is grow some cells and then start to compute with them. And the promise of this technology is power. A human brain can do with about 20 watts what it takes 20 million watts for an actual conventional computer with chips to do. So the idea that these things could do a lot of computing with a lot less power is really a great promise. On the other hand, the prospect of like having a brain in my house, like on a desk somewhere that's like my family computer, is pretty fucking creepy. So it's got both sides. It's got both sides.
Anything that'll help keep the oxygen around by burning less coal and, create more fossil, burn less fossil fuels, anything to keep the atmosphere clean, I think is a good idea. I like that. So my show note, I have to say I had one of the most profound AI experiences I've ever had the last couple days. So there's this, I was talking about it earlier about pulp sci-fi novels. There was this like pulp sci-fi novel I read in the early 90s. And it stuck with me. It had this really great twist in the plot, and it stuck with me. It had a really strange name, and I read it in a weird place too. A lifetime ago, I was in the military, and my unit spent like 2 months in Fort Sherman, which is in Panama. And they had a library on the post, this small library, and I must have read like, I don't know, a book a day. It was like a lot of sitting around, a lot of pulling guard as you do in the military, bored out of my mind. You couldn't leave the post. So I was going to the library, just finding these random books and reading them. And I read this sci-fi novel, and it really stuck with me. And it has an odd name, and I couldn't remember the name. And I don't know, every so often I go looking for this book. I can never find it. I've done all kinds of Google searches, typed in, what the plot was about, could never find it. And this weekend, it just randomly occurred to me, let me go through this exercise with ChatGPT. And God damn it, ChatGPT found that book in a half a second. And I cannot tell you sort of I don't know, what's the word, like the karmic weight that was the existential weight that was like lifted for me of looking for this book called the Legacy of Heorot or Heorot. It has a weird title, Heorot. And I thought it was like the Eye of Horus. I mean, I very vividly remember the plot, and it had this great plot twist in it that I'm like, how come you never see that story device in a movie or anything? And I'm like, could I steal this maybe? Like maybe I imagined it, or no one knows what this is. Let me read my prompt from ChatGPT. Hold on, let me find it.
This is a great use case for AI as a kind of a private detective. I'm going to store some up for our problem that I solve with AI, because I love to use AI this way.
And I have looked for this online and book forums, Amazon, Google, searching for it with basically the same kind of prompt, and nothing. So can you help me find a science fiction novel, probably from the 70s or 80s? I think the title is something like Eye of Horus, but I'm not entirely sure what the exact title is. The story is about a group of colonists on a spaceship that lands on a planet, and they start to colonize the planet, but there's a bunch of indigenous monsters on the planet that are attacking the colonists. Meanwhile, I believe that part of the story is some of the colonists were left in hibernation. When they were left in hibernation, when they were awoken from, sorry, I'm butchering this reading here. When they were in hibernation, were left mentally incapacitated in a childlike state because of some failure with the cryogenic chamber on the ship. Anyway, I'm trying to locate this novel that I read a long time ago in the early 90s. I can't remember the exact title. Can you help me find it? ChatGPT came through like a motherfucker. Again, call me ChatGPT. I'm ready to do this as an ad. And I could not believe it. It blew me away. Like I said, the existential weight that has been on me about this dumb book for so long. And then 20 seconds later, I'm in my library's Libby app. Boom, there it is. And I'm like reading this book. It's just unbelievable. So as silly as it sounds, it's one of the most formative experiences I've had. And some of it was that thing of like, let me just ask this to ChatGPT. Like it still is not this reflex. And I have to say after this, like much more of a reflex. Wow.
That's nice. It makes for a good cocktail party parlor trick too. So I was at a cocktail party once, and I don't know why, but like most houses have at least one landscape photo that the people who live there have no fucking clue what it is. And I was at a cocktail party, and someone was like, yeah, I don't know, maybe that's in Portugal or Spain or somewhere. I just whipped out my ChatGPT, took a picture of it, and said, where is this? It was in Portugal, actually. Gave them the city. So good parlor trick too.
I love it. And I just want to say that the first part of the response makes me, I don't know, a little more sure that like ChatGPT has got a little something going on, which was, I'm 95% sure you're thinking of The Legacy of Heorot. Like not 100%, like 95%, and I think they knew 100% what it was, and they give me a whole description of the book, and then they suggest maybe a few other titles that it could be, but they don't think that it's that. They think it's the one they found. So
Nice.
a little bit of a humble kind of response, but 95% pretty confident. Adam, anything else?
That's all I got for this week. Until next week, Jeff, I'll see you soon.
See you soon.